This is Paul Nobles from eatperform.com, and I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
April has been having mad digestive issues, and she's feeling super bloated, and so she wants to talk a lot about that, I think.
No, I was explaining to Paul how normally I am not a bar person. I prefer whole foods, and lately I have been so busy helping all you awesome people with Eat to Perform that I have not been making a priority to plan ahead. So I have been adding in the Think Thin bars, which are very tasty, and the macros are great on them. They don't have the fiber like the Quest bars, so I like that. But I started having these digestive issues where I don't want to go into grave detail about it, but I currently look like I'm 6 months pregnant.
Yeah.
And I feel like I might have a poop baby, like just waiting, but it's not.
When we talked about going too far, you don't think that did it?
Well, I was just wanting to give the graphic.
That was literally the line we were trying not to cross.
Well, I can't, for the life of me, I have not figured out what the issue was. And then the light bulb went off today, and I'm like, oh crap. I have eaten these bars every single day, which normally I would only eat one like once every 2 weeks type thing, but I've eaten them every day for about the past 5 or 6 days. And they have the sugar alcohols in them, which obviously do not get absorbed by the small intestine. So I'm having some intestinal issues, so I'm dropping the bars.
There you go. Yeah, no, similar happened to me the last week, and one of the things I want to say to everybody is go ahead and get questions ready for us, because we've got a pretty big class, not as big as last week's, but pretty big class, and so if we can get questions going pretty early on, then the class doesn't have to go for hours on end until we can kind of get to everybody's thing. But I started something that I was kind of hesitant to even mention, because I've come out of like a wave cycle of 8 to 10 weeks of performance fat loss. In the 13% body fat, everything's going great. Pretty happy with the results there. So what I decided to do was basically try to eat the number on my Fitbit, just to sort of show people that, one, it can be done, and then two, that, there's various strategies that you have to use as it relates to eating to your level of energy output. And but my plan was to go from where I was with the wave, which I was never really under 2,000 calories, and so the plan was basically to work up from 2,000 to 2,200, 2,400, 2,600, 2,800, 3,000 really quickly. By the third day, I started realizing, holy cow, I'm losing weight. And I'm sure everybody out there is like, wow, that would be awesome, you were eating less, now you're eating more and you're losing weight, like, what's this dude complaining about? Well, that's sort of the point. And we actually talked about it in last week's webinar, where when you eat at a deficit for a while, you've got to allow for a little bit of a bounce back. And so when I wasn't seeing that bounce back, even though my calories were going up, that tells me that my body was, kind of still wanting some more. Is that your microphone? Can you mute your microphone for just a second, April?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's your microphone. Can you just maybe turn down the volume a little bit or something? Because we're getting like some weird feedback. You can unmute though. I don't know. Maybe it's air conditioning or something. There's always something. We do have one question. Okay, you're still muted, April.
I was going to let you finish your story, but I cut the AC off, so the fan blows right down is what it is.
Honestly, I think it's your volume's a little too high. Because I'm still hearing it a little bit, but it's not super bad. Um, so basically, by the third day, I started realizing, hey, if I'm not gaining any weight here, I might as well push it, right? And so this is sort of what we do, and sort of the me search that we talk about a lot, that a lot of people don't do, and frankly, they're sort of missing the upside of what they can see as it relates to their potential, feeling better at the gym, all those types of things. Now, I first want to stop and say, like, my workouts, weren't phenomenal, um, and they're starting to get better. And basically, like I said, my plan was to sort of reverse diet out of the wave method for roughly 4 to 5 weeks to get back to about 3,000 calories. Um, I think I posted today that my average last week ended up being something like 2750, and then my calorie burn was something like 2815. So it was pretty close, like for the first week, and then I had like 3 days where I was relatively low. And so and now the interesting part about this is that my weight, while I did get my weight up a little bit, and like I said, that's sort of the goal. It's not up a lot. It's only to 169. The lowest I had gotten was 166.8. So, as an example, on Friday, I ate 3,777 calories. And so pretty clearly, one of the things that we talked about the last couple weeks that I think is sort of missed on control days quite a bit. And really, I think, we're having a lot of discussions related to this in the coaches course. I'm sorry, in the group sessions, is that people are looking at the control days as this way to create like these huge deficits, right? As if like that's the 2 days that they're going to make this big, gigantic difference. That's really not what control days do. Certainly they help the average a little bit, and that's going to be positive. But what they really do is they sort of set up your body to be a little bit more flexible, and kind of describing it differently, it allows your body to become a little bit more insulin sensitive. Now, insulin sensitivity is the opposite of insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, most people think of, in terms of diabetes and pre-diabetics and things of that nature. And so insulin sensitivity would be a positive thing. So when you go low on fats, it sort of primes your body for when you use carbohydrates eventually to do better, right? And to load them better. And so I think that was a little bit of what I experienced. And I talked about it a little bit in slot, or Science Lab off topic, that sometimes it actually works to your advantage to do it that way. And so pretty much I had the 3 days, and I've been able to eat pretty close, sometimes even more, on the day that I did 3777. That was actually like 400 more, but I had some days where I was less. The very next day was pretty much even. What's really interesting though, and I think people discount this a lot, and it's a big advantage to when you start eating more, and it's one of the reasons why you guys don't gain weight, even though you're scared shitless that you will gain weight, is because of digestion. And so it does get brought up from time to time, that, oh my goodness, I'm doing Eat to Perform and I just poop all the time. Well, digestion is one of the biggest factors as it relates to caloric burn in your body. And so what I've seen is that as I've added more food, my calories and activity have all naturally gone up. Heart rate's actually up a little bit. I think that's partially because of my activity level, but but yeah, it's interesting, and I feel great. I mean, my wife and I both have commented, because, she was on the same plan with me, and, she's come out of it with me, and we're just feeling like, supercharged, and ready to go. And so it's kind of interesting because every time you do something like this, you always figure out something different. And, one of the things that, I'm starting to try a little bit more is adding in a good majority of my Vitargo post-workout, just because, like the other day I had 105 grams of carbohydrates post-workout. That would have been really hard to do pre-workout, just because, it would make the WOD uncomfortable. That's actually the first question we're being asked about. What about the urge to almost throw up during workouts? Is there something that can be done to avoid that? Is that just pushing too hard? Well, the thing that can be done about it is just to not eat as much going into your workout. And so, it is sort of a fine line. And I'll have to say that, like, to you guys, that I struggle with that fine line occasionally. I struggle with, like, what I can get away with pre-workout and then still feel good in the workout. And that's why I think, having my Vitargo post-workout will actually end up working pretty good for me, because I'm not avoiding carbohydrates or the rest of the time, but I'm not eating excessively to make my workout uncomfortable. But in general, what we're really talking about a lot of times, and what's been coming up a lot, is the idea of averages, and so when your average food intake is much higher than normal, Amber Reeves is asking what Vitargo is, and Vitargo is a fast-loading carbohydrate supplement. It's pretty popular. Amber owns a gym in Kentucky. It's pretty popular, with CrossFit Games athletes. It's very popular with people that struggle getting in an amount of carbohydrates. What's really nice about Vitargo is that the way that it loads is like a miracle. I mean, I don't know about you, April, but I mean, I can drink it and it's like my weight is almost unchanged,
Like, you told me about it for a long time and I was hesitant because I'm not a big supplement person, but when I took it, it's a game changer. I actually should get like some free stuff from Vitargo as much as I recommend it, because that's like one supplement that I'm like, hands down, it's the one thing that I can't do without. It's good.
I mean, that's the same thing for me. I mean, I don't have that many supplements, I mean, I do creatine. I think everybody should do creatine. And I'll have, some whey protein, but I'm not a huge whey protein person. I know that, for some people it's inconvenient to always have to eat whole foods. So I get that having that as insurance sort of makes sense. Even in the case of Vitargo, I probably only use it, I'd say, 2 or 3 days a week. Now, I will say when I'm doing my Eat My Fitbit thing, that I am probably going to be using Vitargo a little bit more, just because it loads really well, and it's just really super hard. I'm trying to close my phone because it's beeping. But it's really super hard to get in all those calories and all those carbohydrates without some supplementation. I mean, like right now, my goals for carbs per day are probably somewhere in the neighborhood about 350 to 400, depending on what I'm doing. So that, that's a lot of white rice,
You get used to it after a while.
I don't know. I mean, like I always, it's funny that you were talking about the bloated thing, because I literally, in the last few days, I had one day where I had a couple salads, so that was a good day, but that was the day that I had, almost 4,000 calories. But my last couple days, it's been sort of piecemeal getting in, the right amount of food. But, like today, as an example, I decided, well, okay, whenever I'm sort of struggling meeting macros, or in this instance meeting micros, because you know, a lot of time in the evenings I don't always feel like having a salad. I just add that stuff during the day. And so today, you know, I sort of posted that I was feeling bloated, because obviously that's something that people talk about a lot. And, you know, I thought I'd make a little joke about it. And I was like, well, I'm done with salads now, you know. And I mean, I think that people need to realize, like, you know, food volume does make a difference. And to a certain extent, bloated is kind of what you're going for sometimes. Like in the instance you're talking about, you know, where it's filling up your stomach, it's causing intestinal issues. You know, that's obviously not something that you're looking to accomplish. But you know, you have to do some trial and error to see what works, and you know, that's part of the deal. So Natha is saying, is Vitargo a better choice than dextrose for post-workout? They're basically the same. Vitargo might load a little bit better. Dextrose is basically pure glucose, and Vitargo is pretty much pure glucose. The problem with dextrose, though, is that it can get really super sweet. And so if that bugs you, that does bug me. I like Vitargo because it's not, it's really more starchy, and the flavor's not overbearing. And so, you know, but I would say that if you're comfortably using dextrose and you like it and it's getting you the results that you want, I would not suggest that you necessarily change from that. And also dextrose is a lot cheaper than Vitargo. So that is one big advantage there. Do you have any experience with dextrose, and what are your thoughts on it?
Generally, a lot of people usually compare the dextrose to the maltodextrin. The dextrose will generally, it spikes your insulin really, really quick, but you tend to get that crash. Like you get a really bad crash afterwards where you know, need to take a nap, that type of thing. So, you know, I know that Vitargo is derived from the barley, and dextrose, like what you said, is just like straight sugar. I don't really get the crash from Vitargo, you know.
Yeah. I think it sort of depends on dosing in a lot of those instances. But to compare Vitargo and dextrose to maltodextrin, I don't think is a fair comparison, because for anyone that wants to do that, yes, they do a similar type thing, but in the case of maltodextrin or waxy maize or something of that nature, you'll see significant more bloating for most people.
Yes.
And then so if for instance you work out at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, and you want to load with waxy maize or maltodextrin or something like that, you know, you'll feel a little bit bloated, but by the end of the day, you might be fine. By 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you know, if you worked out at 6 or 7, you know, you might go to bed feeling pretty bloated. And it's not as fast absorbing as the other two, so keep that in mind. Let's see. So Nadia is saying, I have my total daily energy expenditure for my training and control days. My question now is, what type of workout activity would warrant following training TDEE? Weightlifting session versus Metcon versus long endurance activities. Okay, so basically any weightlifting session, that's a workout day, okay? Because the whole point of a weightlifting session is to get enough calories in to basically adapt to the stimulus from the workout, okay? Metcon, if you're referring to something like CrossFit, would also be a workout day, obviously. Any super long endurance would be a workout day. Light jogging, probably not that big of a deal. So probably more of a control day type of situation. This is why I sort of like people to have an activity tracker, just because I think it helps them, you know, come up with like a better understanding. You know, so for instance, in my case where, you know, I'm eating the exact number on my Fitbit, that should really tell you guys like how it should work, right? And so if you know, like today as an example, my calories burned are 2200. I'll probably get to about 2500 on a control day. You know, if your control days are like 1600, that would be a big ding 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 moment for you. You know what I mean? Like I still got in, you know, right at 10,000 steps, and I may actually go for a bike ride after this, you know. So it really does depend on what your overall activity level is. But I think having some understanding of activity makes a big difference for people. And so that's how I would truthfully judge it. But if you don't have an activity tracker, I would say if it's intense, if it's long endurance and it takes a while, you know, then I would consider that a workout day. You know, if you're hiking, you know, for 5 to 10 miles, that's you know, you might want to have a little higher fat day there than going super carbs. But like if you were hiking for, let's say, 10 miles and it took 3 hours, even though that's not a largely glycolytic demanding activity, and you know, you would be in your body would be mostly conserving glucose, it's still the overall drain is going to add up to a good amount, right? So let's say that, you know, you're doing CrossFit and you're burning mostly glucose, you know, for the 15 minutes that you're doing that workout. That's awesome, but that's not like this big, huge glucose expenditure, nowhere near as big as doing a 10-mile hike because of the overall. So if you were 80, you know, 90% there, okay, let's say that you burned 300 calories, okay, and then 80% of those calories came from glucose. Well, you know, that's only 240 calories. If, as an example, you see, this is where like I go math geek on people and they just like, they're like, I don't even want to hear this dude. But you go for a 10-mile hike, it's 3 miles. And so let's conservatively say that you burn 500 calories. So 1,500 calories, 20% of that, you know, ends up being right at 300 calories. So you actually burned more glucose, even though you don't burn as much glucose doing the long hike. And so keep that in mind, right? I mean, walk around the neighborhood, no big deal. 10-mile hike, yeah, you know, you might want to have some carbs. You know, good day to have bananas. Good day to have you know, slow loading carbs because you're not looking for these big, huge insulin spikes and things of that nature. So yeah, keep that in mind. So I hope that answers your question. Let's see. I kind of remember Nadia from the last. She asked multiple questions in different spots. I don't think. I wish people like could see like the dashboard of how we get it because it's sort of hard to deal with that. And this question is for a person that's lightly to moderately active. I would not be considered an athlete. I mean, I don't like it when people don't consider themselves an athlete. We're all athletes. It's just a scale. It's just, you know, you're, you know, kind of working to be something that you'll become later on. And like in my instance, as an example, when I first started getting fit, I wasn't doing anything like CrossFit, you know, and then as I got fit, my body just sort of naturally wanted to like keep going to the next level. And so that's where I think that you'll probably come in. And I don't think, you know, the science of total daily energy expenditure applies to every human being on the planet, not just athletes. Just because we're called Eat to Perform doesn't mean that what we say doesn't apply to sedentary people. We just don't seek out sedentary people because we think that people should be moving, you know, and we think that the good majority of you guys, as you start to approach a healthy lifestyle, you want to be moving too, you know, and so it ends up being a good fit. And so let's see. Nadia's saying she has 100 pounds of muscle. Nadia, can you tell me what your weight is? And then that'll give me some context on what that muscle means. So, I mean, I in my view, so here's my question, Nadia, do you have a fat problem or a muscle problem? From your perspective, because I'll give you my perspective. Well, I'll go ahead and give you my perspective without your perspective. I think you have a muscle problem. She's saying, left, okay, a muscle problem. Yeah, you have a muscle problem. You don't have a fat problem. You're actually, I mean, for your size and for your weight and height, you know, you're average, you know, like no big deal at all, you know. So when you say, you know, I don't feel like an athlete, things of this nature, asking me about, you know, all these cardio type things, you know, I would say that some level of resistance training, I'm not saying like full on go take Olympic lifting classes, but, you know, I was talking to a woman this weekend because we were at this women's expo, which was like a whole different world than what I'm normally used to, you know, being around, you know, fitness competitions and power lifters and Olympic lifters and stuff like that. But what was interesting, I was talking to this woman and I said, you know, you should probably add air squats to your routine. And she said, oh, I do air squats every single day. I was like, oh, cool. She's like, yeah, I try to get those 10 in, you know. And I said, wait, what? You know, and she's like, yeah, I do 10 air squats every single day. I was like, 10 is not going to cause a significant amount of adaptation, you know. And so what I would say to you is, whether it be push-ups, whether it be air squats, whether it be, you know, anything like that, you'll probably see a significant response when you start to match up your food to what you do. And so if you kind of keep chasing that down, down, down thing, you'll never really gain the muscle that will ultimately get you leaner. But if you seek out muscle, you'll get lean pretty quickly because, you know, it sounds like you've probably been fairly deficient in that arena for a while. And, you know, just take it slow. I mean, you've got forever. You're perfectly fine, you know, the way that you are. I'm you know, I suspect that you're probably a pretty healthy individual. And so you have earned the right to be patient. And, you know, if you can figure out something that you like that is resistance training, I would certainly suggest that would be a direction for you to go. And I think you'll see the best result that way rather than viewing your situation as a fat problem, because like I say all the time, most people don't have a fat problem. They just don't, you know, take enough care of the muscle that they're, you know, trying to earn in the gym. So I hope that information helps. Natha's saying, thanks, just bought Vitargo on the weekend, had it yesterday. It's great intra workout. Yeah, it's good intra workout. I think also post, I mean, really, you can do it pre-workout, you can do it just what feels the most right, you know. Pre-workout, I would highly suggest that you not load a lot of it, but it is definitely going to be something that loads relatively quickly, and so you can get kind of the, you know, the glycogen stores to kind of power through a good workout. Paul is saying, if you are already insulin resistant, should you use dextrose or Vitargo? Dudes at my box actually use Skittles. In the case of somebody that's insulin resistant, we're sort of having two questions. You know, the thing with insulin resistance, and first of all, you know, I'm not a doctor. So I would definitely seek the advice of your doctor. But in general, the things that aid that can turn insulin resistance to insulin sensitivity are going to be working out, making sure that you're not, you know, constantly reliant on glucose for energy. For a person that's insulin resistant, I would probably recommend that they get it from sweet potatoes or rice and mostly focus on post-workout. Basically, you have these protein activators that when you are working out, they're called GLUT4 transmitters. And your GLUT4 transmitters basically allow your body to load um, carbohydrates and proteins without activating your insulin at all. And so your insulin is naturally up a little bit and will, want to store things, fairly good. Problem with insulin resistance is that the storage mechanism isn't good because it's been sort of overloaded for a while, or, in the case of a type 1 diabetic, they were born that way. And so, being overly reliant on shots for insulin or something like that isn't probably as good as loading post-workout. Another time that probably does make a little bit of sense, because your GLUT4 are also pretty active at that point, is when you first wake up. I think one of the things that people discount a lot is carbohydrates in the morning. Especially when, you're like somebody like Paula, where you're probably trying to keep your carbs relatively low. And so you wake up with that kind of metallic-y, irony, breath. Usually, if you can have some carbohydrates at that point, that's probably favorable as it relates to keeping your muscle. And that's another thing that helps pre-diabetic people, is keeping the muscle that they're earning in the gym. And that can actually reverse symptoms of prediabetes and actually kind of, cause almost like a remission factor. Once again, not a doctor, this is just information that I've studied. I do a lot of seminars with Mike. Mike is a doctor. He's a doctor of exercise physiology, but in the case of exercise, obviously we're talking a lot to people that, are having issues like Paul is talking about. And she's mentioning right now her body fat. Well, what's interesting about Paula's situation is that she has a lot of lean mass. So that's a good thing. She probably doesn't really need to, be really seeking out a lot of lean mass. She's fine with the amount that she has, but using that in the most effective way, where your carbs are going to be fairly moderate most of the time. I would say in the case of Paula, she's probably better off being in the 2s to mid 2s for carbohydrates, and then trying to use them mostly in the instances that I spoke of. So I hope that makes sense. Let's see. I just need to get yes, around my workouts. She said I just need to get lose her adipose tissue or her fat tissue. And I think that what happens for a lot of people, and this certainly happened for me for many years, is I got to a point where, I always wanted to lose everything that I had gained the whole time. And by the time I was right close to 40 years old, I had been on that path for somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 years. And I had, no success doing that. And so I was willing to try something radical, and that was be patient and really focus on performance. Well, the nice thing about it, and I think all of you will be able to relate to this, is that all the things that you've learned up to this point, whether it's coming from paleo or Weight Watchers or whatever it is you've done, you've learned something. Like, don't discount all that you know from that. Some of the things I learned from my low carb days really sort of helped me realize, okay, this can work a little bit here. And so if I add some carbohydrates here, I wonder what that would do. And that sort of how everything changed. And then, I was able to seek out the advice of doctors and well-known trainers and things of that nature, and that's how ultimately Eat to Perform came to be. Any thoughts on that whole situation, April?
Absolutely all about patience. Obviously, we knew each other before Eat to Perform, and I did the same thing. You know, it's always about just fat loss, fat loss. You know, that's all I care about is fat loss. You know, and once you change that switch, you know, it's a completely different story, and it actually happens quicker. It's just, you know, the mental part is 75% of the battle. I was talking to someone the other day who basically said, you know, I've been dieting, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried everything for like the past 8 years. I'm like, okay, nothing has worked. You were patient and dieted for 8 years. Why can't you be patient and trust for 6 months? You know,
Right.
you know, if you can be patient with that process and it got you nowhere, you know, why not be patient with this process, you know, for 6 months? So,
and I think that's you know, really important. I think the other thing that Paula needs to know is that you know, I don't think April would have technically been, you know, someone with a lot of fat to use. I was 100% a person that had a lot of fat to use. I was close to 50%, you know, probably mid 40s for body fat percentage. I was 225 pounds, had, you know, roughly 125 to 130 of lean mass. And so, so while April is saying that, you will look at April and you go, well, yeah, she's lean and she doesn't know what, you know, my struggle is. I know exactly what your struggle is, you know, and so I just want you to know that your struggle is represented here. I think what April is saying is applicable, you know, and I think it's important that, you know, patience is patience for everybody. But in the case of somebody with, you know, a lot of fat to use, really, it's not like someone that just needs abs, right? It at a certain point, it does become, you know, kind of a mortality question, and you know, the impatience thing, it really does kind of hurt those folks. She's saying, so you totally get it, Paul, where I'm at. Yeah, if you want to take a look on Eat to Perform, I think if you just see before and after, you'll see my original picture. It's sort of funny, like on the sales page, there's like a skinny fat Paul, and then there's like, you know, abbed up Paul. But what you know, I'm telling Teresa, who makes that page for us, is, hey, get that, you know, like fat to use Paul in there too, so people know that, you know, at one point, you know, I had a lot of fat on me, and really this was the only thing that ever worked, you know. So I can definitely relate to your situation, Paula. And you know, I don't know how much you guys know, because I know a lot of new people come to these webinars, but we do have groups that are coming out. We're actually starting the interest list. There's going to be a lot of people really super interested in them early on. You might not be able to get in first round, but in your case, Paula, we have a group called Longboarders, and Longboarders basically are people who are in it for the long haul. And you know, it would have been like the perfect group for me to join when I was 225 pounds. And so, you know, once the availability is there, I would highly suggest that you consider doing that, because I think it'll be enlightening for you. So let's see. Tanya is saying, and what about Carbolin? What does that taste like, the unflavored version? Honestly, I'm not that familiar with Carbolin. Are you familiar with Carbolin? I know that Laura Phelps had a really bad allergic reaction to it once. I think it's sort of similar to Vitargo, but it's cheaper, so I think it's more maltodextrin based, but I could be wrong on that.
yeah, I think it's similar to, I think it's kind of a knockoff of Vitargo. I don't think the gastric emptying is as quick as the Vitargo is. And I think it's similar to Glycofuse. And that really gave me horrible stomach pains. Like, it was gross.
Well, I was there when they had to cut Laura Phelps Sweat out of her squat suit because she had an allergic reaction to Carbolin. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's basically just waxy maize, or like a more refined version of waxy maize, which is fine. The reason why people are interested in it is because it's actually a little bit cheaper than Vitargo. But you know, like I said, if you can afford Vitargo and it works for you, like, you're not going to really try a whole bunch of other stuff. I will say that I have heard positive things about UCAN. Are you familiar with UCAN?
Yes, I have a lot of endurance athletes. Apparently it doesn't it releases a little bit differently, and it doesn't give you it doesn't have the same gastric emptying to it as like Vitargo does. So it's more of a slower release and kind of acts more like a complex carbohydrate for like the longer endurance sessions.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting, because I know Danielle has talked about it. I know she used to use it at one point. I think she's now back to Vitargo. But it's hard to say. Jill, I'm going to get to your question. We just have a lot of people asking questions right now, so I'm going to try and get through the good majority of those first. So Sai's asking, I'm older, in my 50s. I'll be starting weightlifting, but at lower weights and more reps. I will do upper body one day, lower body a few days later. We'll do these one time a week. I plan to put HIIT training with running, jogging in between. On my other days, this will be lower intensity aerobic activity like biking. Will this allow me to gain muscle and lose body fat? Well, yes and yes is the short answer, but not because of the reason that you think. Your approach sounds solid, and I like it, okay? But that's not going to be why you make gains. You're going to make gains because you're coming from a relatively inactive background and you're adding in activity. So what we always say is, in the first 6 months, like, don't diet, because you're going to get the best results that you'll ever get in your life, so kind of diminishing those results, makes no sense at all. And so if you can have some level of balance as it relates to the way that you eat, have a diet of mostly whole foods, occasionally eat some foods that you enjoy. Let's be honest, the good majority of people struggle with, sugary treats, but alcohol, right? And even when I say sugary treats, I really think it's alcohol, and then kind of sugary treats. It just sort of depends on the individual. But, if you can kind of, keep those, sugary treats and alcohol in moderation, and then get, your diet to mostly whole foods with some level of balance, your workouts will just explode. And I do like the approach of having more high rep training, because it will build muscle and allow for some strength. But I would also have a little bit of strength progression in there. Even if it's just strength progression, something like, starting strength or something like that, where, you start off your routine with that, and then you move to what, you're talking about right now. I think the fear from somebody just starting off is that, oh my goodness, I haven't weight trained, I'm going to hurt myself. We're not saying that you should really super push it, but you should try to gain some strength. You should keep trying to put weight on the bar, and I think that'll be positive for you. He did ask this question a while ago. He's not responding, so I'm going to assume that he got that and that response worked for him. So Rube is asking, how do you measure CrossFit on the Fitbit? Be completely honest with you. Okay, so I was saying thanks. So he was here. So that's awesome. I hate giving advice to someone and then I don't know if they've stayed around to hear it. Rube is asking, how do you measure CrossFit on the Fitbit? And the long story short is you don't. I mean, truthfully, Fitbit is not great for measuring CrossFit. But that's not why you want a Fitbit. Fitbit is really useful for all the time you're not CrossFitting. I mean, so for the most part, you can pretty much chalk up 20 minutes of CrossFit at about 250 calories. If you want to put that whole session in, it's about 500 calories. You will get, exercise post Yeah, EPOC is exercise post-oxygen consumption, which basically kind of keeps your heart rate up higher so you get a little bit more burn long term. And so that will be the plus, and you will see that on your Fitbit. The keys to kind of keeping your Fitbit to where it does measure your CrossFit a little bit is to keep, just kind of wipe the sweat away from it a little bit, but also keep it about an inch ahead. All that said, it will lose your heart rate a couple times during the session, and you'll look at it and it'll be frustrating. But don't get frustrated, because truthfully, it's really not tracking your CrossFit. Your CrossFit always was 300 to 500 calories. It was never more than that. And really, it's the time around your CrossFit that is the most important. It's sort of like people that would talk about being at a desk job. When you get a Fitbit and you do a desk job, it alerts you really quickly to the fact that you're mostly inactive. And so if just getting up through the day, having a standing desk, all these things sort of matter as it relates to your overall calorie burn. I think what happens for a lot of people, they have a desk job, right? They're relatively inactive through the day. They go to CrossFit. Feels great to kind of kill themselves at the box and lay on the ground, bacon sizzling, and then afterwards they are on the couch watching The Middle, Modern Family. In general, though, they didn't burn a whole lot of calories. They had a sedentary job and they sat on the couch. They had 1 hour of extreme activity. What we're saying is if you have a Fitbit or an activity tracker, we're not particular to Fitbit, I just have one, I like it, is that if you're more aware, it allows you to go, what, instead of, going, sitting down, chewing the fat, me and the gals will just go for a little walk. You get in that walk every day, then you go to CrossFit, that makes a difference. Instead of 1,600 calories, now you're at 2,100 calories, and so that's helpful. And it's helpful, and I'm hoping everyone's hearing this, that it allows you to intake more food, not using it as a way to create a big deficit. The whole idea of Eat to Perform, the whole idea of being a human being is that the good majority of the time you should not be dieting, and that time will make your dieting effective when you do that, or you have a level of deficit eating. In fact, I think many of you probably are aware of the WAVE method, which is how we get our games athletes, as well as many of you guys, lean. The WAVE method book is done. We're doing final editing right now, and we've got some pretty exciting announcements about that. It'll probably come out probably mid-July, early August, something like that. So we're excited about that, and how it will come out, I think, will be sort of exciting for everybody. So Christina Boudreau, do you have any thoughts on Fitbit, activity trackers? I just, it just always concerns me that people like, well, it doesn't track my exercise well, so I don't want it.
No, I agree with what you were saying. The purposes were, versus, and I was actually thinking about, the idea of, rather than perusing the parking lot, trying to wait on the second spot person to leave that you see pushing the buggy, and just sitting there waiting for 5 minutes, you park in a further spot and walk in. You're purposely trying to be a little bit more active, and I think it's good. I have seen some people who, they kind of push it to the limit a little bit, and they're essentially, they're trying to get, I've seen some people on the leaderboard that have like 35,000 steps a day. I'm like, what the hell did you do? Like, go walk a marathon?
I mean, I have to tell you, when I first got mine, I was doing that as well, and it takes a toll on you.
Well, I think the issue, and I think that's good, but you have to eat some of that food back. You can't eat 1,800 calories and take 31,000 steps a day, you know, and burn 3,700 calories.
Well, I was never doing that part,
Yeah.
but I'm saying I was actually eating a fairly decent amount of food, and you know, I mean, my heels started to hurt. I had to change shoes. You know, I mean, that was a big topic for a while there. Um, so I'm saying, like, LISS is important. LISS being low intensity, steady state activity. And it's nice to increase your LISS and then your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. But it does have a toll, you know. And one of the interesting things that like today, as an example, is it's a rest day, and because I'm kind of eating my Fitbit numbers, you know, if I go to CrossFit, you know, I get to over 3,000 easy. And you know what? It sounds really awesome to be able to eat over 3,000. It's work. It's a lot of food, man. You know, and so like today is a rest day for me. I do have a lot of energy. Not gonna lie about that. I was tempted to go work out, but I was like, you know, just stick with the plan, trust the process. You know, even for myself, I have to tell myself those lessons. But to be honest with you, it's kind of nice to not be having to eat food constantly and really sort of kind of take a break there. And so so that was nice. Christina Boudreau, which I'm very familiar with Boudreaux's because that's a very Louisiana name. She's saying, I'm finding I'm hitting my calorie and going over fat, come close with carbs, but always short on protein. I mostly eat whole foods, traveling reps, so I eat out on the road, South Louisiana food. That's not all bad, right? What is more important, hitting protein and going over other macros, staying under calories? I would say that probably staying under calories is going to be more important early on. When we're talking about hitting protein, I think that there's a range there. And a lot of you guys, when you first start off, you think that, you know, if I don't hit these numbers, man, I'm not doing Eat to Perform. And truthfully, if, you know, you're shooting for, let's say, 0.8 of body weight, maybe that's the number that you were given, and you end up being 0.7, you know, 2-3 days a week, not that big of a deal. I would not sweat that. But, you know, in terms of being a traveling rep, one of the things that I always suggest to people in your instance is to try and go relatively low carb throughout the day. You know, in the case of, you know, someone traveling in the state of Louisiana, it's really easy to get a lot of energy density. And so if you can, you know, kind of keep your carbs relatively low, that's usually a pretty good strategy, because most of, you know, the things that makes that crawfish etouffee taste good and the jambalaya and red beans is the lard and all the other things that you don't see that ultimately ends up adding to the equation in a big way. And so if you can kind of keep your meals relatively small, relatively low carb, that's a good strategy. She's saying Popeyes, laugh out loud. They have Popeyes up here in Minnesota now. There's actually a number of them. I don't eat at Popeyes all that often. Even though it is near here, and I love Popeyes to pieces. But you know, it's just a priority. You know, it's just what, you know, is most important to you. You know, and if you're trying to kind of keep with a decent strategy, it's not that those things can't fit in occasionally. It's just that if you have a diet of mostly whole food, you're adding more to the equation than you're taking away. And I know you were kidding. I mean, I love the fact that I live in Minnesota and that I don't live in Louisiana, because it's got to be tempting as hell to live down there. The food is so amazing. And, you know, being from there, every shot, you know, there's a restaurant, you know, restaurants here that occasionally kind of get it right, and we tend to visit those. Actually, there's a restaurant There's a mostly Cajun restaurant that's about 2 miles from my house. That's probably the best Louisiana style food in the Twin Cities. I don't eat there all that often because, frankly, every meal is like 2,000 calories. Um, but it is nice to have a taste of home every now and again. So I don't know if I've said it, but I'm from Louisiana, and my dad lives in Port Allen, and I have family in New Orleans. So yeah, that's how Boudreaux makes something for me. I bet you're really tired of what is it, Boudreaux and what are the jokes? It's Boudreaux and what? Um, I can't think of it right now. How long should oh is it Boudreaux and Thibodeau? That's right. How long should you expect to see weight loss? Um, I think really the focus with Eat to Reform isn't weight loss; it's fat loss, and um, basically it goes in two cycles, right? There's the cycle where you're expanding and you're using your lifting and exercise to lose fat by staying remotely in the same um, area where you are. So like, let's say that you're 150 pounds. Oh, I didn't know Francesca was from Louisiana. That's cool. So let's say you're 150 pounds and you use 6 months, just as an example, random example, you could use 3 months, but so let's say 3 months, just to not freak somebody out. You stay relatively at 150 for that 3 months, and then in that time, you raise your food intake and you PR everything. It's a safe assumption that you're adding muscle at that point in time. Once, let's say that you were eating 1,800 calories, now we got you up eating 2,500 calories. Now you can look at a performance-focused fat loss time period, and that'll be 8 to 10 weeks. Usually you can expect to lose anywhere from 3 to 5% body fat at that point, and then basically we just sort of ride that down, to get to where your goals are. She's telling me her height and weight. I think one of the things that's interesting about Christina is that she's tall, and one of the things that just like ticks the heck out of me is the advice that tall women get related to nutrition. Every tall woman that I talk to, has had some soccer coach or volleyball coach from the past that has said some really stupid stuff. And normally, that hasn't led to more enlightenment. It's led to less enlightenment. And so I think for Christina, once again, she would be a good candidate for longboarders. We're going to get all you guys in to the groups if that's something that you're interested in. If you're not interested in the groups, you should be able to get the similar amount of attention. I mean, obviously you can come to these every single week. I mean, we're not going to stop until we answer your questions. Sometimes April has to leave to put her kids to bed, but I stay. She gets to talk to you guys during the day in the forums, and so I get to make up for that time in these things. Christina was also saying something about the Apple Watch and how much she likes it. One of the things I mentioned this week that I thought was kind of interesting was that with Apple, you can actually reset the stats, which I think is sort of nice for a lot of people who are coming from, maybe a restricted background or haven't had a whole lot of luck with their approach. Just clearing that data and just getting a nice fresh start. I think that's a plus. I think the problem with the Apple Watch is mostly that, it'd be hard to work out in depending on what you do. I'm hoping that in Christina's case, she lifts weights because usually someone with her stats are usually pretty strong. Let's see. Okay, she CrossFits. So what CrossFit do you go to, Christina? I visited a few people. I actually did a seminar at CrossFit NOLA. Okay, Denham Springs. Okay, so you're not far from my dad. All right, so EJ's saying, I need to get down there and do another. I know I promised Jeff that I would come down and do another seminar, um, but I haven't been able to make it down to Louisiana. Let's see. So EJ saying, hi, Paul. April, my name's EJ, new to Eat Form, been trying it out for 2 weeks, signed up today. Triathlete training for 70.3. I love the fact that we're getting more of the cardio folks. You know, I think what we're saying really works well for cardio. And we have many ultra marathoners and triathletes and marathoners, and a lot of them are seeing good results. Said, I use the Lose It app and Eat This Much app, and I struggle with food eating enough. With all my exercise, I find myself leaving calories. How much of a disservice am I doing by not consuming all my daily calories? I don't think you're doing yourself that big of a disservice. He also said later that UCAN is great, so that kind of, you know, goes with what you were saying earlier, that runners, it's big in the running community. I think the thing, EJ, that runners struggle with is that they build these huge, you know, deficits. And what they find is that it's very difficult to eat, you know, towards their level of activity. And so the strategy that I like to take with my athletes that are runners is, if, as an example, you know, burn 5,000 calories for the day, maybe you might not be able to get all 5,000 on that day, right? But on a rest day, that is a good day to make up the difference. And so that would be something that I would consider for you. It's certainly not something you want to just jump into, but I think that, you know, runners that don't eat to their level of activity run into joint issues. Obviously, we know that they don't, you know, keep the muscle that they have on their body. And so, you know, you want to find this sort of happy medium where you're progressing, you're staying strong, your joints and tendons are strong, but you're also not overdoing it. And usually you can look at your weight, but usually I would say that runners and any long endurance people, they're probably the people that react the best to Eat to Perform, even better than CrossFitters, even better than the best athletes in CrossFit, because, you know, your body has sort of wanted this to happen for so long. And so once you sort of, you know, match that harder with smarter, it makes a really big difference for runners. And so I hope that's helpful. I hope EJ's still here because he asked it a really long time ago. We're past 8 o'clock. So April's looking at her watch going, you know, kids need to go to bed.
After this week, I'll be fine because school gets out this week.
Gotcha.
So party's on then.
So EJ, definitely take a look at, I mean, do you know what your calorie burn is on some of your longer days? And then what your calorie burn is? I mean, what a lot of runners find is that their rest days, you know, the calorie burns ends up being pretty high. But, you know, I think what you'll find is that you can sort of get close and then use that rest day as a way to kind of have fill in some of those carbs and not go super high on fats. That'll be helpful. So Tanya's saying, RE, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, what kind of workout were you suggesting? Okay, now here's the interesting thing about type 2 diabetes. And, you know, I love CrossFit. I do CrossFit. My only certifications are in CrossFit. CrossFit is not a great exercise for diabetics. And we know this because we've seen a lot of data. They just don't react to it super well. That doesn't mean that they can't CrossFit. It just means that coming in and CrossFitting 6 days a week usually isn't going to be very good for type 2 diabetics. We talked a little bit about insulin resistance and why weight training makes a lot of sense, especially for those folks that need to build a little bit of muscle and things of that nature. And so when you can lift slowly, maybe go to failure, do more reps, things of that nature, I think you'll get more out of your occasional CrossFit. But in general, for type 2 diabetics, CrossFit will spike your insulin in a big way, and will cause blood sugar issues at times. Rob Wolf used to talk about this all the time. So if you want to Google Rob Wolf, CrossFit, and diabetes, I think you're going to get some really good information. And what I would say to you is, don't get discouraged and say, I can't do CrossFit because I'm pre-diabetic or I'm diabetic. What I would suggest is that you're not going to get the result that you think you're going to get. And so you see a lot of people that, have a lot of fat to use, and they end up kind of getting stuck at those higher levels with CrossFit. And I haven't seen a ton of people go do super well in that scenario. Certainly there's always outliers, and those get played up in a big way. But in general, I like to see those people come in with a more moderate approach. And I think you're even seeing a lot of CrossFit trainers starting them off this way, where they're doing more sled pushes, they're doing more weight training, and really kind of building their work capacity up to where they're more insulin sensitive. They're dealing with their insulin resistance really well. And I think that's a better formula than going, oh my God, I got a whole bunch of fat to use. And, my doctor says I need to lose weight. My doctor says I need to lose weight. This looks hard. It's obviously going to help me lose weight. It ain't going to happen. It doesn't happen for a lot of people. And the reason why it doesn't is because it's already stressful to do CrossFit, even if you're lean. So when you're heavy, you have so many factors going against you that you're just better off starting off in a moderate way. We have a bigger gentleman and his wife, and I've talked them into lifting with me on Wednesdays, and I think they're going to get a good response from that. I think when we talk about insulin sensitivity, and one of the biggest ways to build insulin sensitivity, we used to say this all the time, what got you fat, when you weren't working out, is the thing that gets you jacked when you are working out. And so if you're insulin resistant and you're building muscle and you're doing pump style training, I'm not even the best at this, honestly. I'll get to good fatigue on my lower body stuff, but I don't always go to failure as much as I should upper body. And you can see it. My chest isn't huge. My arms aren't huge. In CrossFit, we tend to focus a little bit more on lower body, deadlifts, squats, things of that nature. And I always say to myself, I'm going to make it more of a priority, but I never do, because I just always enjoy the other stuff so much more. But I do need to make that a priority. And I will say my chest and lats and stuff like that, they are a lot bigger than they used to be. But that's still a work in progress for me. So I hope that answers Tanya's question. I hope that's not. She said, so more weightlifting then, and start slowly. She's a swimmer. Yeah, I would say weightlifting, and then but make sure that it's like pump style training, where you're getting in lots of reps. Okay, let's see. We're gonna try and whip through some of these here. Letha's saying,
I have to go.
Okay, no problem.
Last week. Good night, everybody.
I feel bad because Jill was asking a bunch of questions, so we're gonna get to Jill real quick. But we posted these in Slot, and so we were getting a lot more people. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't post it in Slot, but it just seems to me like most people aren't always aware that we have these available. So it's nice to have that option. So Aletha's saying she's new to Eat to Perform and trying to have more carbs after my workouts, which 90% of the time is lifting CrossFit. Goals, fat loss. I think that's everybody's goal. Is have more lean mass than and your fat going down. So I've been concentrating on higher protein fats. I'm not a fan of that idea. I use MyFitnessPal to record my macros. My question is, to lose this weight, should I be eating at a caloric deficit according to this food tracker, or should I be meeting those calories because it's not taking them in to consider my calories lost working out? I think that what you do is you go into the Eat to Perform forum and get your plan from the coach and ignore what it says from MyFitnessPal, because it sounds like you're just coming from a dieting background and you thinking that dieting and deficits are the answer, and they are part of the equation. But saying that you're focusing more on proteins and fats, that's not a strategy that I think even works in a deficit. I would say that that's actually a better strategy from a maintenance standpoint. Like when I'm maintaining my weight, my protein or my fats go up. When I'm losing fat, my fats go down. And so I would be talking to a moderator. I think that's going to be as somebody that's new, just starting off, that's really where you start. There's no point in me, having long conversations with you about a fictitious idea. They can give you a specific idea, and then we can talk about that next week. So, or you can, talk to your coaches in the forum. Julie's saying, hi, Paul, new member, Eat to Perform, only joined a few days ago, like to shed some fat, was working out, so similar to Aletha. It was working with Jillian Michaels EVD 3 days a week, heavy weight training with barbell training 2 days a week. I've learned through Eat to Perform, though, that I'll have better fat burning by having 3 to 4 rest days. How does this work? I wouldn't say that you're going to have a better result with 3 to 4 rest days. I think the goal is rest days, right? Some level of recovery that allows you to adapt better. I think what they're referring to is, or the coaches are going to be referring to, is the idea if you're trying to create more of a caloric deficit, all that working out, on top of the deficit is going to create a stress atmosphere that's really not going to allow you to lose weight. That said, the good majority of people aren't really losing weight because they have been kind of banging the same hammer for a long period of time. And so that's what we try to kind of get you guys to stop doing. And so I don't hear from those folks that you should, have 3 to 4 rest days. What you should be hearing is that, really kind of get that work capacity up with the work that you're doing outside of the gym. Maybe look at an activity tracker. You can track it on your iPhone. You can, there's a lot of ways. That information is surprising to people. What a lot of people often find is that they're burning 2,700 calories a day, but they're only eating 1,700 calories a day. Well, you're going to hit a wall real quick and you're going to plateau. And the only way to really get out of that plateau is to do the opposite. But most people don't consider that because they're scared shitless about adding calories, because it seems somewhat logical that they'll gain weight, even though they won't. And even though I'm proving it, and even though thousands of people are proving it, it's still scary. And we totally get that, She's saying 5'4", she's mentioned her weight. I don't see that as a big issue one way or the other. I would like to know what your body fat percentage is. Usually people in your situation with a fair amount of fat to use actually have a muscle issue and not a fat issue. And so that would be something I would consider if I were you. Working with a trainer, I would have him do more pump style, him or she do more pump style training to failure, things of that nature. I think you'll see some benefits from that. So Jill, sorry, I've taken forever to get to you. I've just begun, still reading. I would say reading is not the goal of this. The books are really to be used more as manuals. And so if you can, what I would suggest is go first to the forum, get your plan, and then use your books to see, okay, well, is this me? Okay, I'm going to read this chapter, or, I need to, work on this. rather than asking a question in the forum, I'm going to read chapter 7 of Flexible Dieting book. That's how I would use the books, and that's how I think they're most helpful. She's saying she's 51, 5'1". She's mentioned her date, every diet done, Nutrisystem, low carb. Let's see. Weight training 4 days now, but thinking of stopping out of convenience. Is yoga enough? I would say yoga's fine. In terms of enough, I think the issue for you, just being completely honest with you, is that you've tried everything under the sun, and that's caused a certain amount of damage. Whether you like it or not, ultimately you're going to have to pay a little bit of price for that. And your height, weight, those things aren't extremely bad. I would not be focused on those types of things, but I can tell you that your journey is probably going to be a little bit longer than most people's journey. A lot of people won't tell you the truth about that. We're going to tell you the truth because, frankly, I don't have any reason not to tell you the truth. Ultimately, there's only one truth, and that's, you can't starve yourself through your whole life and see a good result from it, right? And so, if we can get you to eating a certain amount, and you probably want to be a little cautious there because, like you said, you've created a little bit of inflexibility over time. So if you can be a little patient there, that'd be a good thing. She's saying she does like weight training, but she's just finding it relatively inconvenient. I do think that you can get away with 1 to 2 days of weight training, maybe some level of resistance training, pull-ups, push-ups, air squats, things like that. In the case of, doing some home workouts, that might also fill a little bit of the gaps as it relates to convenience. I know a lot of the time for myself, when I get really busy, haven't been able to get in a workout, something like that, right? I mean, it's easy as can be to just, come up with like 3 movements, do those as, an AMRAP in 15 minutes and get a good result from it. So that would be the one thing that I would consider if I were you. So I hope that's helpful. Hit me up with a follow-up if it's not, but I'm going to try and move on to some of the other folks. Christine is asking, let's just double check and make sure. Okay, Cheryl, I'm sorry. Is there how you submit question? Hope so. Been doing Eat Perform solidly almost a month, and I'm doing it by tomorrow. Once I get the results, should I ask the moderators to recalculate my macros? Yes, is the simple answer. The one thing I would suggest going into your bod pod is that you go into it without a lot of expectations and just view it as a baseline, because I think you'll get a better result out of it. If you go into it, hoping low, something of that nature, usually, that kind of information can be a little disturbing. And so I know it was for me. I talk about it all the time that by the time I got the will to do one, I found out I was 32%, and that was after losing 40 pounds, So that was a little frustrating, because I thought, hey, I'm probably, 20% here, 8% more, and I'll have abs, and then you find out you're 32% after working your butt off, and you realize, there's a little bit more to this equation. And, that little bit more for me came down to building muscle. I kind of got to like 20% and then just stuck for forever. And then I started lifting and it changed my life, and so that's a big part of the story. Jill did follow up. She said, sounds good. Thanks a lot. Let's see. Nadia is asking a follow-up. I'm going to have to get to that afterwards, Nadia. We just have so many people that we've not been able to address at this point. Let's see. Christine, question is similar to Christina's. I'm 5'8", 36 years old. Started doing flexible dieting in April and signed up for Eat Perform in May. It's been about 5 to 6 weeks. Gained about 10 pounds since April. I'm getting stronger and PRing on my list for sure, but I'm getting bigger and it's scaring me. At what point should I worry about this and consider cutting calories? Well, I don't know that cutting calories is the answer, but I don't know what your macros are. I don't know what a coach has set you up with. But you should have panicked 5 pounds ago. That's the long story short. It's not bad that you are where you're at. I think what happens with flexible dieting is that, you know, you start off in April and you're like, wow, this is awesome. You know, I get to eat more things than I used to be able to eat. But then I'm not getting the result that I want, right? And so she's saying she CrossFits 4 times per week, 5x5 strongman lifts on 3 of those days. She's saying she's at 23.25 and 19.25. What are my thoughts? Christine, can you tell me what your weight is? Let's see. I believe I'm around 24% body fat. Oh, okay. So yeah. Well, my thoughts are you're under eating dramatically. See, I'm not looking fitter or leaner, but bigger. I just look like a bigger version of myself. You're certainly doing something wrong. And I think, you know, it'd be smart. Probably should have mentioned I started about 163. Now around 173. Let's see, but she's saying I believe I'm around 24% body fat. Maybe, you know, hopefully. It's hard to say, you know, those type of stats, you know, don't sound like that to me. I mean, just being completely honest with you. I think that what is probably the issue, if you're your size and you have the amount of muscle that you think you have and all this other type of stuff, and you're only eating 2,300 calories and you're eating 1,700 on workout days or on control days, you're probably not doing a whole lot, you know, other than your exercise, and that catches up to you, you know. I don't know what you're doing related to carb cycling. I'm assuming that on your lower days, you're eating at least 100 grams less of carbohydrates. You know, unless you have an activity tracker, we won't know. But there's only really two things that are happening, okay? And both of them, one's easy to fix and the other's hard to fix, okay? The one would be easy to fix is the fact that you're really not doing anything more than your workouts, and so therefore 2,300 represents a caloric surplus because you're not doing very much. My guess is that's not the case. My guess is that you're doing more than you think, and so it's potentially that, you know, causing this like stress level that ultimately you're not really addressing. It's sort of hard to be, let's see, she's saying my job is completely sedentary. I'm ordering a Fitbit today. Actually, I walk my dogs every day. You know, until we know some of that information, it's really hard. I mean, I will say this, if you are 24%, you know, I mean, that's pretty close to nailed it. I mean, you know, my suspicion though is that you're probably closer to 30, and you wouldn't be talking to me if you weren't closer to 30, right? And so I think that we have to start peeling back the onion, and the only reason I said that you wouldn't be talking to me unless you were 30 is because, you know, there's some concern as it relates to, you know, weight, fat loss, whatever. At 24%, most people, you know, pretty, you know, okay with, you know, the way that their situation is, and they're probably not going to join Eat to Perform unless they're, you know, trying to get better at CrossFit or something of that nature. There's some reason that you're gaining 10 pounds, okay? There's something as it relates to your approach that is wrong. And so you need to get in with a coach. I mean, can I ask you, she's saying that's a guess based off height and weight and age when I was at 163. what I'd be interested to know, if you do the math, the difference between 163 and 173 is basically about 5%. So that could make a little sense, based on my numbers and your numbers. What are coaches saying to you? Have you raised the red flag? Hey guys, here, I'm gaining 10 pounds. Is anybody saying anything to you? Because I think the devil is in the details in these situations. Sometimes it's just, well, I haven't been recording my alcohol. That's a big one a lot of the times. The other is going to be some level of misunderstanding. A lot of times if people's sodium intake's really high, that can kind of throw things off. And so those are things that I would consider. But I think, long story short, you need to get in, talk to a coach, and then get that thing stopped. 5 pounds, no big deal. 10 pounds, you're probably enjoying flexible eating a little bit too much, or there's something wrong with your approach. And, hopefully, like I said, the other thing that it could be would be just your stress environment, that your stress is too high, you're not getting very much sleep, your workouts aren't effective, and, everybody kind of focus on adrenal fatigue. I would say maybe you're burning 2,700 and you're eating 1,700. It's hard to say without a full package of information. So that's something I would keep in mind. She's saying, yes, they kept my calories the same and increased my carbohydrates and I decreased my protein. I was not ever meeting my protein numbers. Okay, thank you, Paul. I'll look into it more. Yeah, I would actively seek out April. Truthfully, if you can afford it, I would consider the coaching. It allows us to really kind of intimately work with you and give you more specific information. I usually suggest that to people that are struggling. A lot of people, are able to go to the forums, get coaching, and then they don't need anything, which is awesome. I love that. But some people need a little bit more attention. And so, hopefully, we would be able to address that. And everything we do has a money back guarantee. If we don't get you what you need, we're not trying to take your money. So definitely, let's try and figure out some way to make this work. Start with the forum. If that's not working, let's try the coaching and let's see if we can get this moving. So let's see. Barbara is saying, if you have time for more questions, I do. I can actually stay here until midnight. My family is relatively self-reliant because I have teenagers. But my wife is actually with them right now. I'm going to see Frozen. Say, if you have time for more questions, I've been CrossFitting for 3.5 years, 5 to 6 days a week, adding in kickboxing, plyometrics 2 to 4 times a week. Wondering if doing CrossFit 3 times a week and cardio 2 times a week may be beneficial. Depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to get better at those things, then I would say that that's beneficial, and then we would get your food intake up to get better at those things. If you're doing those things to lose fat, I would say that that's not a great formula for losing fat, because any deficit that you'll create, your body will ultimately just adjust to, and you're going to atrophy your muscle in the process. And so a lot of the benefit that people get from this huge caloric burn, like I said, one of my problems right now, I'm 13%. I think one of the biggest problems that I have is I'm just kind of, an antsy guy. So it's really, really super hard. I build these huge caloric deficits, and I don't always, I don't always focus on, the building portion of things, because I enjoy what I enjoy, and so, if I were to focus on a little bit more building, that would probably get me into the, single digits a little bit easier. But, those are things that, as long as you're patient, you can kind of, get that taken care of. Let's see. Barbara did not have a follow-up. Let's see. Nadia asked a follow-up. There was a couple questions that I'm kind of. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. Nadia said, last question, within how many minutes should I consume my post-workout meal? That's highly individual, not really that important, to be completely honest with you. Obviously, if it feels right, do it. There is some benefit. It's not huge. It's more beneficial if, for instance, you're, Usain Bolt, but there is some benefit, to optimization. But it would be marginal for someone that's, new to working out or is really kind of leading more of a, kind of a low activity life, like you mentioned earlier. Let's see. So Tanya saying, I'm glad I'm not diabetic then, as I CrossFit 4 times a week. I was wondering if I have a friend who was just diagnosed and she's coming from years of being anorexic and is very thin. What's interesting about what you're saying is that a lot of people don't realize that you can become insulin resistant by keeping carbs low. And that's why we talk about this level of flexibility all the time and really kind of try to coach people in that direction, because for the most part, when you don't allow for fat adaptation, you don't allow for carbohydrate metabolism, it does have an effect. And so a lot of people focus on the, I'm eating too many carbohydrates, I'm pre-diabetic, blah, blah, blah. It happens the other way as well. If you don't give your body enough nutrients, if you don't give your body enough carbohydrates, it has no reason to really focus on that. And so that will cause some negative effects as well. So like she's saying, someone who's very thin, anorexic, diabetic, right? So let's not, just focus on the negatives of overeating. There's always some room for balance. Let's see. Let's see. Paula, if I use Eat to Perform and get metabolically better, then you should be able to respond better to CrossFit, right? Well, that's exactly what happens for virtually everyone. What a lot of people don't realize is that, undereating ends up being a negative. Now, I think Paula was asking questions earlier. Let's see, about being pre-diabetic and things of that nature. And yeah, if we can get some lifting in, if we can get some, kind of a more gradual approach, it should allow you to get more benefit from your CrossFit later on. Tanya's saying, so more, okay. So more weight training, less HIIT or Metcons. That is correct, Paula. See, Julie. Yeah, stress put me in the hospital for a week last year, so I'm thankful I found Eat to Perform. I'm so hopeful it can work for me. It'll work for you. I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't work for you. Because like the people that get concerned that it won't work for them, it's like, why wouldn't eating an adequate amount of food be better for everything? What's been interesting about this Eat My Fitbit thing that I'm doing is that I normally sleep well. I'm sleeping like I've been hit by a tranquilizer dart. I mean, it's just unreal how eating an adequate amount of food is good for stress. It's good for sleep. It's good for sex drive. I mean, it's really super positive. So Julie's also saying it was tested at once at 22% and once at 25%. Let's see, Cheryl's saying thank you. I think, let's see, is it important to have your body fat tested best way? Yeah, I think it is important. I mean, if you can afford it, and if it's convenient for you, I think it's something that you should do. Because it's one piece of the puzzle, where I'm actually having a conversation with someone who's kind of developing an algorithm with 34 different data points, trying to come up with some ideas as it relates to better health, and so that's pretty exciting and something that I'm looking forward to being part of. Let's see. Barbara's saying goal, lean out, lose fat, but not necessarily bulk up. Therapist and doctor keep telling me to decrease my CrossFit if I'm scared of gaining weight. I was, but not anymore. Only thing I'm scared of today is falling back in my disordered approach to food. Yes. What I would say as it relates to bulking up is not probably a reality for a lot of people. Most of the CrossFit Games athletes that you see that might look bulky or something like that, they work out 4 to 5 hours a day. So if you don't work out 4 to 5 hours a day, you're probably not going to look like them. But you can look like whatever version it is for you. I think that we obviously get a lot of people that have a difficult relationship with food. We've been able to help a lot of those folks. It's certainly something that, not from a doctor perspective, but from a strategy perspective. I think if you've had, relationships with therapists and stuff like that, that's a step in the positive direction. I think that you'll get a lot of support, in Science Lab Off Topic, because there's a lot of people that have been in your shoes. So I would keep all of that in mind. Let's see. So this is going to be the last thing. I think this is actually a response. Paul was saying, sweet, because I hate Metcons. I don't handle them well. Talk about the metallic thing. I'm going to die feeling. Yeah, I think that, Paula, a smart approach for you. I think you should have some metabolic conditioning, but that might just be walking for you right now. So I appreciate everybody being here. I'm kind of glad these are going long. I mean, because we had something like 80-something people in here at one point. So that's a lot of people we've been able to help. And so I appreciate everybody being here. And we'll see you guys in the forums and in Science Lab Off Topic. Talk to you later.